والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد عليه الصلاة وأتم التسليم ثم أما بعد. So, welcome everybody. I'm going to be jumping right into our discussion on the book Al-Qayyim by Imam Al-Qayyim rahimahullah. And alhamdulillah, last week we touched on the devastating effects of murder, killing, whether Muslim, non-Muslim, but in particular the special and unique status that believers have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how gross a sin that is, and a tragedy that is, to take the life of a believer, someone who says La ilaha Muhammadur Rasulullah, and the consequences that come with that. And we kind of got long-winded, so we didn't get to touch on the next major sin, which is zina, fornication or adultery. So that's what we're going to be covering with that today. And then some of the things that are related to it is how people fall into it and how to try to, as much as possible, stay away from it. But again, also some of its consequences. So we're just going to jump right into it. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال المصنف رحمه الله نفعنا وإياه بعلمه في الدارين اللهم آمين. فصل مفسدة الزنا. The ill effects and the corrupting nature of zina. Right? The Sheikh says, وَلَمَا كَانَتْ مَفْسَدَةُ الزِّنَا مِنْ أَعْظَمِ الْمَفَاسِدِ وهي منافية لمصلحة النظام العالمي في حفظ الأنساب وحماية الفروج وصيانة الحرمات وتوقي ما يقع أعظم العداوة والبغضاء بين الناس من إفساد كل منهم امرأة صاحبه وابنته وأخته وأمه وفي ذلك خراب العالم. So the first thing that the Sheikh says is that zina is one of the worst sins and atrocities that somebody could commit. Right? There are so many terrible effects that come from it. Right? And just some of those things is that it directly contradicts, right, the foundations of community. Right? So you have a single believer, right, brother comes together with a believing sister, they get married, right, and then of course 1 + 1 in this particular equation equals 3, right? They're going to have, inshallah, believing children, and that becomes the foundation, right, of community. And when you make up families, right, and then those families, once they make up a community, then that makes up, a nation, a ummah, etc. And so someone who is stepping outside of that, right? Someone who's stepping, for example, who's married, and he goes outside of his marriage, right? Where he has something that is halal for him, or the same for the woman, they are chipping away at the bedrock and the foundation of community, right? And he mentions some of the different ways that it does that, right? For one, right, one of the maqasid of Sharia, one of the major goals and reasons for the Sharia and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislating, right, the Sharia, is that it's supposed to protect lineage. There are others as well, but this is one of the major functions of the Sharia, is to protect people's lineage, right? And so that people know who their parents are, people know where they come from, people know their ancestry, and then of course that all has practical implications when it comes to who you can and cannot get married to, who you're allowed to and who you're not. When it comes to inheritance laws, you need to know, right, who your family are and who you're related to and how much is owed to everyone. All of that is connected to ansab. This goes against that. Protecting chastity, right, and people's purity. And then it also impugns on people's honor, right, and diminishes that. And then not only that, but it causes people to fall into animosity, which anybody should be able to understand that, right? If somebody wife is cheating on him, the animosity that's going to be between them, the animosity between him and the person who has done that. If they had children, then the animosity that's going to be caused. Now the children are going to be looking at that person as being someone who has broken up our family and caused its, ruin now. So these are all things that it causes, right? And then not only that, but obviously the animosity between all of the different people who were touched by this. So it may not just be, right, the mother who cheated, or the father who cheated, and the person they cheated with, right? We mentioned the children, but those people are also sisters, they're also brothers, they're also aunties and uncles, right? All of these people that are in their sphere, right, will somehow, some way all be touched by this in some way. So you can see, right, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes zina as being sa'a sabila, right? That is the worst path, right? But under him, the Sheikh goes on to say, then of course it's going to corrupt everybody who's touched by it, right? Whether it is the person who is doing it, the mother, the sister, the children, right? And this, of course, although he's mentioning the women, this is also from the men as well. وَفِي ذَلِكَ خَرَابُ الْعَالَمِ. And he said it just ruins everything. It just simply ruins everything. وَكَانَتْ تَلِي مَفْسَدَةِ الْقَتْلِ فِي الْكِبْرِ ولهذا قرنها الله سبحانه وتعالى بها في كتابه ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم في سننه. So he says that it is so destructive and so terrible that it, in terms of its severity, in terms of major sins, it is a close second behind murder and killing, right? So even though people may not see it that way in today's time, especially unless they're maybe directly impacted or affected by it, but oftentimes people on the outside looking in today's society, people making zina, they see it as being acceptable, normal, everybody does it, but in Islam and Islamic lens, again, because of the detriment that it has to the community and the society at large, and the community of the believers specifically, this is looked at as being just a close second behind murder, right? And so subhanAllah, he says for this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala oftentimes in the Quran coupled it with murder itself and killing someone without rights. And also in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Furqan, ayahs number 68 through 70, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون. And that's the shahid right there. ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا إلا من تاب إلى آخره. All right, to the end of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, and pay attention to the different sins that he's mentioned. First he's saying, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ. So he says those who don't associate partners with Allah, or they don't call on anyone other aside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's mentioning shirk, right? And of course, major shirk, right? What does that do to someone's Islam? And I'm asking all of you, what does major shirk?
Takes him out of the fold of Islam.
It takes somebody outside the fold of Islam. So he's mentioning that. And then right after that, وَلَا يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسِ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ. And then killing a soul or killing an individual unjustly, without right. Right? Murder. So right after what takes you outside the fold of Islam, shirk, the antithesis of tawheed, he mentions murder. And then right after that, he says what? وَلَا يَزْنُونَ. And those who do not commit zina. So he put shirk, murder, zina, all in one basket. Right? Again, showing the gravity of them. Because obviously shirk is going against someone's very purpose in life. And then murdering and killing someone, right, is obviously a gross tragedy that someone would kill an innocent person. Someone who says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, specifically, and in general killing anybody for that matter. Right? Because there's a certain sanctity to life in humanity. Right? And someone is snuffing that out when they do that. And so for that reason, once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put all three of those things together, the consequence, he says, وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ يَلْقَى أَثَامًا. And then whoever does that, they're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, as sinful. And so what's going to happen to them? يُضَاعَفْ لَهُ الْعَذَابِ. Then their punishment will be multiplied. Not that they will just be punished, but that it will be magnified and multiplied for them. يوم القيامة, and on the day of judgment, وَيَخْلُدْ فِيهِ مُهَانًا. And they will be made to remain or abide in that punishment and in that torment, يَخْلُدْ فِيهِ مُهَانًا, forever, for eternity, humiliated. وَعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about these things, right, in very clear and strong terms. As believers, this is something that you should never be involved in. It's something that you should be far removed from, right? Later. So the Sheikh goes on. فقرنه بالشرك وقتل النفس وجعل جزاء ذلك الخلود في العذاب المضاعف ما لم يرفع العبد موجب ذلك بالتوبة والإيمان والعمل الصالح. He said, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what I essentially what I just explained, that He put shirk and murder and zina, right? All of them having the consequence and the compensation as being forever in punishment that is continually multiplying, right? So long as that servant does not make tawbah and believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and work righteous actions. And so somebody has essentially a huge deficit to come back from if they fall into that, right? So obviously there are people who were not Muslim before, then they become Muslim. And it's their iman and it's their righteous actions, right? First and foremost, I should say, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that sin of shirk is wiped out and clean for them. But then their faith, and then following that up with righteous actions. And similarly, someone committing murder, right, or committing zina, the only thing that will bring them from the brink is that they make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they have iman and faith, and that they follow it up with righteous actions. It's not enough that someone says, well, I did that before, but then I just live on my life as if nothing happened. No, you have to make amends. And this is a concept that we have to keep in mind when making tawbah, right? That it's not simply one of these two rituals. Astaghfirullah, 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 and then I'm the same. Even if I stop that, but I'm the same. Or tawbah, make wudu, pray 2 rak'ah, as is mentioned in the hadith of Abu Bakr, right? When you want to make tawbah, or say the istighfar, those are kind of like the ritual aspects that you need to do in order to explicitly express to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm wrong, I messed up, I acknowledge that I did it, I feel bad about it, and you're saying, I'm sorry, Allah, I'm coming back to you. I messed up, I jammed up. But then you gotta follow that up to show that you're actually really remorseful, regretful, I feel bad, so I'm trying to be extra better, and I'm trying to be better than who I was when I slipped into and fell into that, right? And that's what tawbah, iman, and amal salih. Like you gotta follow that tawbah up with righteous actions and trying to make up for what you've done, right? And that shows a level of sincerity, that I'm genuinely, I really am sorry, because look at how I changed myself. I'm in practical ways. I didn't just do this ritual where I say stuff, or I did a few things here. No, look at, I'm trying to change my trajectory. I'm trying to be better. So then, the Sheikh goes on, وَلَمَّا كَانَ الْمَبْدَأُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ قِبَلِ الْبَصَرِ جعل الأمر بغضه مقدما على حفظ الفرج فإن الحوادث مبدأها من النظر كما أن معظم النار من مستصغر الشرر فتكون نظرة ثم خطرة ثم خطوة ثم خطيئة. So he said that, listen, the beginning of all of this, somebody falling into zina, right? And to be clear, when we say zina, I know that there are some young here, but zina is either one of two things. A man and woman who are married, and either of them essentially stepping out on that marriage and being intimate with some other person. So the man being intimate with another woman, and the woman being intimate with another man outside of marriage. That is adultery. And then also called zina, but one is called as fornication, is someone who is not married, and then they go and have intimate relations, right? A sister with a brother, or a brother with a sister, but they're not married. But nonetheless, they are both grave sins. But I just want to be clear when we keep saying the word zina, and I keep saying it, it's talking about both of those things, all right? But the Sheikh, he says what? that it all starts with this. It all starts with this, right? And for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, actually gave a command to lower the gaze, right? بِغَضِّهِ, right? That you lower your gaze, that you protect your gaze and your look, right? Before he mentioned protecting your private parts, so to speak, and protecting your private parts. He said, because, of course, any incident or any affair doesn't occur except that it started with a glance, with a look. And so he goes on to say, and that's how it is. First there's a look, then there's the thoughts and the ideas, and somebody ruminating and thinking about it. Oh, I can't stop thinking about her. Oh, I can't stop thinking about him, right? And they just keep mulling over it and over, and looking at whatever image it is in their mind, and imagining it. What if it was like this, and what if we were together, if we could just get away, if we could, et cetera, et cetera. And they're thinking, right? He said when they start doing that, when they have that image in their mind, and the thoughts in their mind, then it's then they start actually planning. Right? And then from the planning, then it comes to what? The execution, the khati'ah, that they actually fall into, whatever it is. The point though is that what? It is a step-by-step process. Nobody ever says, hey, how you doing? And then all of a sudden they wake up in the morning like, I don't know how we ended up here. Right? That's not how it is. It is step-by-step. Right? And the beginning of that is this. Right? And so he says, for this reason, وَلِهَذَا قِيلَ مَنْ حَفِظَ الْأَرْبَعَ أَحْرَصَ دِينَهُ اللَّحَظَاتِ وَالْخَطَرَاتِ وَاللَّفَظَاتِ وَالْخُطَوَاتِ. So he said, and for this reason, right, the fact that it all starts with the looking and the gaze, right, and then it ends up going from there, then it elevates a little bit, then it moves on a little bit more until someone is finally lit in zina. He said, it's been said that if you protect 4 things, then you'll protect your deen. The first thing is your lahabat, like your moments, the wal-khatarat, your thoughts, wal-lafadat, your words, your statements, wal-khutawat, and your steps. And so, and he's going to explain what those 4 things are. Right? He's going to go further into them. فينبغي للعبد أن يكون بواب نفسه على هذه الأبواب الأربعة يلازم الرباط على ثغورها فمنها يدخل عليه العدو فيجوس خلال الديار ويتبر ما على تتبيرا. So he said, so for this reason, right, it being a step-by-step thing that you can fall into or end up in, where you end up saying to yourself, how did I even get here? He said it's befitting that a believer, right, is a bawaba for themselves, that they essentially are like a sentry and a guard, right, on their own selves. And in particular, that they are like, he said like, he compares it like somebody, like a sentry, like a guard who's on the borders, right, like a border patrol, right? And those people, you can't sleep when you're on patrol. You got to stand guard because your enemy could be coming and entering at any moment, right? And he's saying this right here is how the shaitan will get to you. This right here, the shaitan will get to you. Because whatever comes in here, y'all, goes to where? And the heart. And your heart, right? It goes from here, right? There's even the expression that says, right? The eyes are windows to the soul. And that is so true. Imagine a young person, right? From a young age, which by the way, statistically, right? 87% of children by the age of 11 will have seen some form of pornography. From the time they're 11, by the time they're 11, which means they could have seen it earlier. Which means they could have when they were 7, could have when they were 6. And in today's time, you see babies. You can go to the dentist and see mom waiting, right, for the dentist, and the baby's holding a phone, right? And of course, you can't control everything that's on that phone, right? So it can be a way out to do that. It could be possibly even earlier. But long story short, what? 87%, right? You can look that up online. That statistic though, 87% see that. So imagine then someone who is snared by that from the age of 11. Let's start there. 13, 15, right? Imagine what that young person, how they will see, how they'll understand, and how they'll perceive, right? Whether they're a boy or a girl, how they'll perceive the opposite gender or the opposite sex. What they'll see those as, depending on which one they are. Imagine what they will see, that act, which is supposed to be sacred, which is supposed to be blessed, which is supposed to be, right, between two believers. That's what it's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be a beautiful thing that ends up producing beautiful fruits. But is that what they'll see if they've been fed a steady diet of filth, right? And we said the what? That eye, where they're feeding it through, goes straight to their what? To their heart. So imagine, by the time they're 17, by the time they're 19, by the time they're ready to get married. So the Sheikh is saying you have to be on guard. Now, being on guard, of course, we're speaking about on a certain level, everybody here as an individual, right? Everybody here, they have a personal, individual responsibility on their own in terms of what you see, what you listen to, right? But then, right, those of us who are older, those of us who have some information, those of us who have some knowledge, those of us who have some sense, there are those of you who are parents. There are those of you who are big brothers, older sisters, aunties, uncles, teacher, coach, etc., right? You have the added responsibility, right, of helping young people protect their gaze, right? Have an extra and added responsibility. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara wa quduha an-nas wal hijara, right? To the end of the ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O you who believe, first and foremost, before anybody else, qu anfusakum, save yourself before anybody else." Then after that, doesn't stop there. Allah doesn't say you don't worry about it. Be like, push everybody else out the way. Be like, save me, get out of here. No, then you have to do what? Then your family, right? It starts there. And then, of course, all those other added roles that you might have, like I mentioned, a teacher, a coach, a mentor, or whatever it is, an older sister who's at the masjid, and she has some other young sisters that are up under her, or brother, same thing, older brother, mashallah, he's looking out, he's the OG, mashallah. Yep. But especially yourself and children. And the analogy that I can give is like when you're on an airplane, right? So, you know how there's the stewardess or the steward, whatever, right? And they give out those little directions. Nobody ever pays attention to them. But one of the things that they say, right, is that when there's a loss of cabin pressure, right, what happens? The oxygen mask comes down. And who mask you supposed to put on first?
Yours.
Huh?
No.
Adults?
Yourself.
Yourself. You got, yeah, that's what you mean. Okay, yourself. You got to put yours on first, right? Then after that, then the children, the elderly, and everybody else. But yours first, right? Now, and he's going to talk a little bit more about that, so we'll stop there. But know for sure, brothers and sisters, right? Especially in today's time, we take it very lightly. And that's exactly what Shaitan wants. Do not take it lightly. This right here, that's what he's saying, is you got to stay in guard on this right here. You got to stay in guard. Because Shaitan, right, all he is waiting for and looking for, and the way he can get to your heart, he's just looking for a chink in the armor. All right? So we keep going. Faslun abwab al-ma'asi al-arba'ati. So the Sheikh, he goes on, all right, he says there are essentially 4 doors, right, to these sins. There are essentially 4 doors. وأكثر ما تدخل المعاصي على العبد من هذه الأبواب الأربعة فنذكر في كل باب منها فصلا يليق به. So he said, since the pathway to these sins are namely entered into through these 4 things that he just mentioned earlier. So he said, I'm going to mention or go into detail a little bit more in each one. So the first one, he says, فَأَمَّا اللَّحَظَاتِ, those moments. فَهِيَ رَائِدُ الشَّهْوَةِ وَرَسُولُهَا وَحِفْظُهَا أَصْلُ حِفْظِ الْفَرْجِ فمن أطلق بصره أورد نفسه موارد الهلاكات. So he says, so the first thing are those moments, right? It is essentially the leader or the guide, right, for your desires, right? And not only that, so protecting your basar, she mentions, is, or excuse me, your moments, is the foundation of protecting your private parts. So whoever essentially lets and looks at every which way and looks at whatever passes their way, he said, then you are opening yourself up, right, for destruction. Because like I said, that means Shaitan essentially has, it's fair game, and it's open season. And for him, if you open that, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, and they ain't got nowhere to go, which means they all gonna get shot. And they all gonna be taken. There's nothing, right? It will corrupt your heart, and he will have free reign. So the Sheikh, he goes on, mentioning the hadith of the Prophet pointing to the different instances or moments that you're supposed to be mindful of your gaze. So he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إياكم والجلوس على الطرقات. قالوا يا رسول الله مجالسنا ما لنا بد منها. قال فإن كنتم لا بد فاعلين فأعطوا الطريق حقهم. قالوا وما حقه؟ قال غض البصر وكف الأذى ورد السلام. So the Prophet ﷺ, speaking to some young men who were essentially hanging out, and they were chilling, right? Essentially on the block, on the street, right? And he said to them, إِيَّاكُ وَالْجُلُوسُ فِي الطُّرُقَاتِ. He said, I'm warning you, be mindful. Watch out when you're out there on the street. إِيَّاكُ وَالطُّرُقَاتِ وَالْجُلُوسُ فِي الطُّرُقَاتِ, and sitting and just hanging out and kicking it on the street. They said, oh, Messenger of Allah, we don't have nowhere else to hang out. We ain't got nowhere to sit. He said, Majalisuna, Malana Badr. He said, we ain't got no alternative, nowhere else to go. So if we're going to be out here, then what are we supposed to do? He said, فَإِن كُنْتُمْ لَا بُدْ. He said, well, if that's all you have, and that's what you got to do, then he said, then give the road, give it its right. Give it its due. They said, okay, well, Messenger of Allah, what is it? Its rights then? How do we carry ourselves? What's the adab? What's the conduct when we're out there? What are we supposed to do? Right? He said, first and foremost, lower your gaze. Right? So, when you're out on the street, when you go to the store, when you go to the mall, wherever you might be, right? Whether physically or, right, on the phone, virtually, be mindful of your gaze. Right? Somebody might say, I gotta use social media for my work. I gotta be online for my work. Then, just like the physical street, that you should be lowering your gaze. If your work calls for that, if that's where you need to be, you have to be doing certain things, then be mindful of your gaze. And then the second thing he says, وَكَفُّ الْأَذَى, and be mindful and be careful and prevent, don't harm anybody. Right? Now that harm can come in different ways, being loud and obnoxious, right? But you'll see sometimes people are. It could be by you spreading filth and spreading negative things, right? Again, we're talking about like on social media, for example. وَرَدُّ السَّلَامِ, and giving people salams, right? So even when you are hanging out and kicking it, you don't forget that you're a Muslim. Even in your free time, even when you're relaxing and enjoying yourself, you're still supposed to, you're still a believer. You're still a Muslim. You're still a Muslimah, right? And you're supposed to still maintain that lens. You're supposed to keep it on, that you are a believer. And so even when I'm enjoying myself, entertaining myself, it still has limits, right? So, and then he goes on. وَالنَّظْرُ أَصْلُ عَامَةِ الْحَوَادِثِ الَّتِي تُصِيبُ الْإِنسَانِ فَإِنَّ النَّظْرَةَ تُولِدُ خَطْرَةً ثُمَّ تُولِدُ خَطْرَةٌ فكرة ثم تولد الفكرة شهوة ثم تولد الشهوة إرادة ثم التقوى فتسير عزيمة جازمة فيقع الفعل ولا بد ما لم يمنع منه مانع وفي هذا قيل الصبر على الغض البصري أيسر من الصبر على ألم ما بعده. So now he says, listen, so since the look, right, your gaze is essentially the first thing or the fundamental thing where most affairs and incidents that people fall into, most of it happens from there. So then he said, and why? Because فَإِنَّ النَّظْرَةَ تُولِدُ الْخَطْرَ, right? Because when you look at something you had no business looking at, right? And I don't mean, and when we say look at, we don't mean like I saw something and then I said stop for a lot and you look away. No, we're talking about, oh, okay, and you say, all right, yeah. And you're just staring at it, and you're kind of like, you're enjoying it, right? Like, I ain't touching nothing, I ain't did nothing, but you're looking, right? So then, okay, that is going to cause what? Then it's going to be khatarat. He said it's going to give birth to and lead to you having thoughts now, and you're going to be thinking about it. And then that's going to lead to, the thoughts are going to lead to fikra, ideas. Those thoughts of you just simply thinking about it are then going to lead to ideas. And then those ideas are going to start to light a fire of desire. And once that that's kindled, right, your desires, then it's going to continue to become stronger and stronger until it becomes, right, a firm intention. Like, I'm going to go do something, right? I'm going to call. I'm going to send a message. I'm going to go meet them. I'm going to go do whatever. We're going to make plans, and we're going to do whatever it is. Again, he's simply illustrating and reiterating that's just how it is. So he's explaining to you so that you understand, right, that you stop it before it even starts, right? And then he says, it's been said, right, that patience with you lowering your gaze, because sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it might be a challenge. It might be hard, right? And no doubt, we live in a hypersexualized time, right? Everywhere you look, both for men, especially for men in terms of the objectification of women, but even for women as well, right? It's hypersexualized. But he said, but you being patient on lowering your gaze is a whole lot better and easier than trying to be patient on the pain and the regret of having done something wrong. He said it's a lot easier to deal with that, right? And basically disciplining yourself, pushing yourself, forcing yourself, than dealing with whatever might come afterwards. Now, so he says, وَمِنْ آفَاتٍ, another. He said, and one of the negative things that comes from looking, أَنَّهُ يُورِثُ حَسَرَاتٍ وَالزَّفَرَاتِ والحرقات فيرى العبد ما ليس قادرا عليه ولا صادرا عنه وهذا من أعظم العذاب أن ترى ما لا صبر لك على بعضه ولا قدرة لك على بعضه. So he said, one of the negative consequences of you looking at things is that it ends up you becoming regretful, right? Because you might be looking at something that you can't get. It's not attainable for you. Especially if you're watching something or if you're looking at something, right? And that's not real. That's not reality, right? That's makeup. That's Botox. That's injections. That's whatever. That's not real. And you can't get it. So then what happens? That causes you to be regretful over that. And to be essentially what you have, you might not look at it the same. Right? And it starts diminishing what you already have. Right? And then he says, then that what's even worse is that now you essentially have to fight to be patient on something that you want that you can't even attain. He said that makes somebody miserable. That you're hoping and wanting for something and looking at it, which means you're driving up the want and the desire even more for something that you can't even get. And he said that's the worst punishment, right? No. So وَأَمَّا الْخَطَرَاتِ. So now he moves on to the second thing. Khatarat are like your thoughts and your ideas. He says فَشَأْنُهَا أَصْعَبُ. He said now at this point it's more challenging. فَإِنَّهَا مَبْدَعُ الْخَيْرِ وَالشَّرِّ. He said because this could be the starting point of something good or evil. ومنها تتولد الإرادات والهمم والعزائم. And it said it's from here, يعني your thoughts, right, that give birth to your desires, your wants, right, and not desires in terms of like sexual desires, but your wants and your hopes and your aspirations and your dreams, right, the things that you want. فمن راى خطراته ملك الزمان نفسه وقهر هواه ومن غلبته خطراته فهواه ونفسه له أغلب ومن استهان بالخطرات قادته قهرا إلى الهلكات. So he said essentially, if I could summarize it, he's talking about self-discipline, right? And if you can essentially discipline your mind and your thoughts. If you can discipline your mind and your thoughts, right? He says, then you will be in control of your desires and your hawa. But if you are not, and you allow them to control you, and they overcome you, then what will happen is they will lead you to your destruction. And that destruction can ultimately lead someone to the hellfire, right? And it's for this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ, right? Subhanallah. What's the rest of the ayah, Sheikh? So hold on, stop right there. So he says, look at the person who, have you not seen the person who they take their desires as their God? And look, this is deep. He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leads them astray. Adallah Allah, right? Ala what?
على قلبه وأضله الله
أرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه على what? That's deep. Even though they have knowledge, even though they have information, they know that it's wrong. They know that it's haram. They might even know the ayah. They might even know the hadith. But because they've been dwelling on it, thinking about it, right? Even them knowing that it's wrong, that's not enough, right? And that's why he's saying, right, this khatarat, he said this one's a little more dangerous now, right? Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you reach that point where your desires are your God, and you do that and you follow that, even you having knowledge or information is not enough to combat that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let that person go astray. Why? Because they essentially, they're not fighting it anymore. They're succumbing to and giving into their carnal desires. And so, whatever it is that they want, their nafs wants to do, I want to sleep all day. Then that's what he does. I want to talk to such and such, this female. And that it's not going to think about the ayah, but the Prophet ﷺ said, but you know, the consequences, you just do it. Whatever their desire tells them to do, that's whatever they feel like, that's what they do. Right? And he says that person, God takes it. That's their God. Right? And so this is something that I think we have to be especially mindful of. Because nobody in here would say that zina is otherwise than haram. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. But and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us what? You simply knowing that ain't enough. You could still be misguided. And you can still fall off the path. And somebody who their God is their hawa, their ultimate end is what? Jannah. Right? Even though they know. And you can ask any Muslim. I don't care if he's 12 years old, 13 years old, 10 years old, they know. Let alone somebody who's 20, let alone somebody who's been Muslim 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, somebody who's born Muslim their whole life, they know. Now, so, again, he's saying that, listen, if you don't control this, if you don't control your thoughts, right, and you just let them roam and kind of like daydream about that, it could lead you to your destruction, right? ولا تزال خطرات تردد على القلب حتى تصير منى باطلة. He says that they won't stop, right? Because once shaitan gets you there, right, it's not going to stop. You're going to keep thinking about it. You're going to keep thinking about it. He says until it becomes like your hopes, right? Kasarabi. No. So now we'll go on to the third thing when he says وَأَمَّا اللَّفَظَاتِ, right? So now he's talking about essentially protecting your tongue and your statements. فَحِفْظُهَا بِأَنْ لَا يَخْرُجَ لَفْظَةً ظَاهِرًا بأن لا يتكلم إلا فيما يرجو فيه الربح والزيادة في دينه فإن أراد أن يتكلم بكلمة نظر هل فيها ربح وفائدة أم لا؟ فإن لم يكن فيها ربح أمسك عنها وإن كان فيها ربح نظر هل تفوت بها كلمة هي أربح منها فلا يضيعها بهذه وإذا أردت أن تستدل على ما في قلبي فاستدل عليه بحركة اللسان فإنه يطلعك على ما في القلب شاء صاحبه أم أبى. So the next thing he says is you being mindful of your statements and you speaking. And this again, also very important. And he says that you should be keen to never have anything that you're going to regret come out of your mouth. So essentially he says every time you do want to make a statement, essentially you should think to yourself, is there any good and is there any benefit with what I'm about to say? And I'm sure y'all heard the expression, think before you speak. This is what he's saying. Think before you speak. Right? So that a Muslim, a believer should be deliberate in what they say. So he says, think before, but it shouldn't just be that you think, it should be, am I going to get some type of benefit out of it? Right? Some ribh and some fat, or not. فَإِنَّ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهَا رِبْحٌ. He said, but if there is no benefit in it, there's no good in it, then just be quiet. And this, of course, the Prophet ﷺ taught us, right? He says, مَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. That whoever believes in Allah, and they believe in the last day, and look at it, this is like, it's like a condition, right? If there's this, then do this, right? One naturally necessitates the other. If you believe in Allah, and you believe in the last day, that's what you say. You really believe it. You say, La ilaha Muhammadur Rasulullah. You really about it like that? Then, when you speak, either you speak good, you speak positivity, you speak things that are beneficial. If not, if it's backbiting, if it's ghibah, if it's hurtful, if it's negative, if there's no benefit, it's not constructive criticism, it's not lifting people up, it's pulling and tearing people down, wife, kids, family, community, the Imam, the Sheikh, the board, the people, the Musallin, whoever, then just, if you're a believer, then you go, be quiet. You're not going to say that because that's not what a believer does. Not if you believe in Allah in the last day. So that also implies that what? If you do that, then you really believe in Allah in the last day? Because if you did, and look at it, if you really believe in Allah, and you really believe in the last day, then that means what? That when I speak, I believe that Allah hears me. I believe when I speak that Allah sees me. And He knows what I say. And not only that, but there's a day of judgment, which means that what? That whatever I say, I'm accountable for. And that's the connection between those things. So if you really believe that, then that's how it's going to affect and impact your behavior and your conduct and how you speak. Because you really believe that God's listening to you. You really believe that God would be upset with you if you said the wrong thing or spoke the wrong things. Similarly, you could say, even if you didn't necessarily speak it, if you were sending DMs, if you were sending communications, if you was, it doesn't even have to necessarily be a phone call. It could be a text. It could be whatever it is. You really believe that Allah sees you? You really believe you're going to be accountable for it? Then this is how you're going to conduct yourself. Tell you. And that's essentially what the Sheikh is saying. He says, no. He said, okay. And then even if you do, so he said, it's not even just one question. First question, is there any benefit to what I'm about to say? He said, and then even if there is, وَإِنْ كَانَ فِيهَا رِبْحٌ, you still don't think about it again. هَلْ تَفُوتُ بِهَا كَلِمَةٌ هِيَ أَرْبَحُ مِنْهَا, is what I'm saying going to cause me to miss out on saying something even better? I could say this, but it might cause me to miss out on saying something even better. So he said, فَلَا يُضَيْعُوهَا بِهَذِهِ. So then you're thinking like, I'm not going to say something if it's going to be, there could have been something else that I said or something better. وَإِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَن تَسْتَدِلَّ عَلَى مَا فِي قَلْبِ So he said, look, if you want to know what's in somebody's heart, just look at what's on their tongue, what they say. He says, and it will show you what is exactly in their heart, whether they like it or not. شَاءَ صَاحِبُهُ أَمْ أَبَى. Whether they like it or not, you'll know. If somebody's always talking about business, side hustle, money, profits, gains, whatever, again, that doesn't intrinsically make this person bad, but you can have an idea of what's in his heart. If somebody's talking about, a female, a woman, whatever, that's all he's talking about all the time. If somebody's talking about good things, positive things, it's a mark and an indicator of what is in here. Right? So you can't have somebody, right, who has a vile tongue, and then he'd be like, but I got a good heart though. No, you don't. Because if you had a good heart, it would be expressed on your tongue. That's why the Prophet ﷺ mentions, right? إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً إِذَا صَلُحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. He said there is an organ in the body. There is a lump of meat, right, in the body. On its own, it doesn't look like that big a deal. Matter of fact, you might even say if you were to look at a real one, a beaten right there, it's almost repulsive. Veins, arteries, all of that, going in and out of it, pumping. So, but that little artery though, if it's corrupted, if it's vile, if it's wicked, if it's messed up, if it's unclean, then the rest of the body that is relying on it, both spiritually and physically, all of it is messed up. All of it is corrupted. All of it is spoiled. All of it is snowed in. And conversely, but if it's good, and if it's clean, and if it's pure, and if it's maintained, and it's polished, then the rest of the body will be good and straight. He says it's the heart. So look, what's that got to do with what we're talking about if you said about your tongue? Well, your tongue is a part of your body. And it's essentially, right, the relationship between the heart and the body, and how you can say somebody what is on their tongue, what their hands are doing, where their feet are taking them, is indicative of what's in their heart. We'll give an analogy, right? You have a general, and his relationship to his soldiers is what? What is his job? The general.
To lead.
Give them orders.
To give them orders, to lead them, but the way that he leads them is by giving them orders, telling them what to do, right? And then the soldiers, in relation to the general, what's their job?
Follow his orders.
Obeys.
To obey and follow those orders. The heart to the body is like the general to his soldiers. So, if the heart is good, he's going to give good orders. He's going to give sound, smart, intelligent, reasonable, common sense orders. And then the soldiers, they're just doing what?
Follow.
We just following the orders. We were just doing what we were told. That's it. So if somebody is speaking well, speaking positively, doing good things with their hands, their feet taking them so that their body finds themselves in good places, then that's indicative of what?
Heart.
They got a good heart. The general is doing what he's supposed to be doing, and vice versa. So when someone is doing haram, steeped in haram lifestyle, and then they tell you, but I got a good heart though. You're like, look, I don't know what's in your heart though, but right now, everything that he's telling me, they're saying otherwise. Right? And who said that? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? And at the end of the day, it's like Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he said, listen, we don't judge people by what's in their hearts. You're right. Somebody said, only God can judge me. That statement's sort of kind of true. Yes, only God can judge what's in your heart. And on Yom Kippur, only Allah can judge that. But when we see what you're doing, we're human beings. That's all we can judge, because we don't know what's inside. So, likewise, that is for the tongue. You want to be mindful. You want to be careful about what you say, right? Because it could lead you somewhere you don't want to be. Like, so the Sheikh goes on. قال يحيى بن معاذ القلوب كالقدور تغنى بها. That's essentially repeating everything we just said right now. So we said وسئل صلى الله عليه وسلم عن أكثر ما يدخل الناس النار فقال الفم والفرج. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he was asked, what will cause people to go to the hellfire the most? What will be the number one reason that causes people to go to the hellfire? And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned two things. Al-famu wal-farj. The person's, right, their mouth, right, what they say, right, and of course, their private parts, way out of the. And that is in Sunan at-Tirmidhi wa Sunan ibn Majah. So then he goes on to say, وَمِنَ الْعَجْبِ أَنَّ الْإِنسَانَ يَهُونُ عَلَيْهِ تحفظ والاحتراز من أكل الحرام والظلم والزنا والسرقة وشرب الخمر ومن النظر المحرم وغير ذلك ويصعب عليه التحفظ من حركات لسانه حتى ترى الرجل يشار إليه بالدين والزهد والعبادة وهو يتكلم بكلمات من سخط الله لا يلقي لها بال ينزل بكلمة الواحدة منها أبعد مما بين المشرق والمغرب وكم ترى من رجل متورع عن الفواحش والظلم ولسانه يفري في أعراض الأحياء والأموات ولا يبالي ما يقول. SubhanAllah. He says, and he said in something that is amazing, is that you'll see a person, right? يَهُنَ عَلَيْهِ التَّحَفُّظ, that it's easy for them to essentially protect and be mindful of eating haram, the wrongfulness of committing adultery and zina, stealing, drinking alcohol, looking at what is impermissible, right? He's still talking about the tongue, right? He's saying they can do all of this, but then it's difficult for them to essentially close their mouth. It's hard for them to shut their mouth and stop moving their tongue. He said, even you'll see somebody who yusharu ilayhi bid-din. You would think that this person, this man or this woman is quote unquote religious. They're even seemingly religious. Was zuhd, asceticism, right? That there's somebody who is indifferent to the dunya, right? With ibadah, and they're, engaged in ibadah. And yet, وَهُوَ يَتَكَلَّمْ بِالْكَلِمَاتِ مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ. But they speak words that anger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they pay no attention to. They don't think it's even that big a deal, but it causes them to be flung into the far reaches of the hellfire. And it could be simply one word. Again, he's trying to accentuate the gravity and the importance of what you say, because it's in a stark contrast to how people usually see it. We were just playing. We wasn't serious. It ain't that big a deal, right? Come on, we was just chopping it up. It's just not that big a deal. Whether it be talking about whatever kind of things, or I was just talking to her, I didn't do anything haram, or I was just talking to him, we didn't do anything haram. And he's saying, listen, you looking at it like that could get you flung into the far reaches of the hellfire. Matter of fact, even this happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and there were ayat of Quran that were revealed about it, right? Where they were speaking about the mujahideen who were going into battle, the Sahaba at that time, right? And they were talking about how big their bellies are and saying other kinds of things and mocking and making jokes and making fun of them, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed ayat, right? That they were doing this. And they said, we were only playing. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, nah. Right? This playing that you did with your tongue, that you saw, is not that big a deal. Disparaging, disrespecting. Talking about the believers, right? In his cause, committed to him, dedicated to him in the ultimate way, but you have disbelieved after belief. Again, showing the gravity of your statements and how they could be, that you don't see them as a big deal, whatever, and it could be egregious with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, a young person disrespecting and talking back to their parents, right? We're even taught in the society, in American society, that's normal. Once they reach teenage age, you know, they're kind of like finding themselves and getting into their own identity and who they are. It's normal that they talk back to their parents and argue and back and forth or whatever, right? They even try to tell that that's acceptable, right? Now, granted, definitely, there will be pushback when they get older, but that it becomes normal and that in their mind and in their eyes, that it's okay to be disrespectful to parents, to be talking back to parents as if they're not even parents. Like they on the basketball court, just talking to somebody else, another dude. Or like a sister talking to her mom, like she's on, you know what I'm saying? She's in one of her little Snapchat groups. To their face. And again, they see a what? And it's not that big a deal. Right? And he's saying that's not the case at all. Right? And then what ends up happening is what comes to Allah in the Rajul, what's a word in I didn't feel like he said, how many people do you see who are keen and diligent to stay away from fawahish, right? Abhorrent acts and fahisha. But their tongue is sharp and has no problem touching those who are alive and those who are dead from the Muslims, and they don't care at all. How many times you see people talk about and disrespect the Imam? Whether they agree with that Imam, whether they don't agree with that Imam, he's an Imam, he's a Sheikh, he's an alim, and people talk about him and disrespect him or say things about him. And we don't even have to go online, even here, right? In the community, right? Somebody's been Imam 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Oh, he don't know nothing. Oh, he ain't nobody. He ain't whatever. Even if he ain't, even if he isn't that knowledgeable. 10 years he gave to the deen. 10 years he's been leading the community. Does that person make mistakes? Who doesn't have mistakes? But then for you to come, right? And what they call that? I don't want to say the quarterback on Monday. Here you come anyways, talking about things, sitting on the sidelines.
Backbiting.
Huh?
Backbiting.
You backbiting, but you on the sidelines and you tell, oh, this quarterback, he should have done this, he should have done that, he should have handed it off to the court. But you ain't doing nothing. But you talking about him. Or you talking about other people. Right? And we're saying teachers, scholars, alims, ulama. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't have mistakes. They might have. They for sure have. There is nobody who's free. كل بني آدم خطاء وخير الخطائين التوابون. The Prophet said that. Everybody makes mistakes. But again, you don't look at it like, well, that means we just sit around, sipping shy, talking about somebody. Huh? Let alone an alim, a sheikh, etc. Let alone a brother, a sister, somebody you don't get along with, you don't agree with, right? That's not the way of the believer, that you sit around talking about people. But again, it happens all too often. And then of course, it's only exponential when we talk about on social media and online. Matter of fact, right now, I have a online group asking me questions about what we hear people talking about Sheikh so-and-so, Sheikh so-and-so, Sheikh so-and-so, and Sheikh so-and-so. And they're telling us we shouldn't be listening to any of them, right? We shouldn't be listening to any of Sheikh so-and-so, Sheikh so-and-so, and Sheikh so-and-so, right? But Sheikh so-and-so, Sheikh so-and-so, and Sheikh so-and-so makes da'wah to millions, not hundreds, not thousands, to millions of people. Not getting any, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, but you have people who casually talk about those people all the time. And this is us getting away from the Islamic adab. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned, right, that the wealth of the Muslim, the blood of the Muslim, and the honor of the Muslim is sacred. دمه وماله وعرضه أو كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. طيب المهم So the Sheikh, he goes on mentioning a hadith that's in both Bukhari and Muslim. He says, من حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن العبد ليتكلم بكلمة من رضوان الله لا يلقي لها بالا يرفعه الله بها درجات وإن العبد ليتكلم بكلمة من سخط الله لا يلقي لها بالا يهوي بها في النار جهنم. So he says now, this hadith that's narrated by Abu Hurairah, that the Prophet ﷺ said, a servant speaks a word from the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they don't even pay it any mind. They don't even realize how wondrous it is and how beautiful it is. The effect and the impact that what they said had. They don't even think about it, right? يَرْفَعُهُ اللَّهُ بِهَا دَرَجَاتٍ, and Allah elevates and raises them degrees and stages and levels. That you spoke a kind word to somebody. You had nothing else. They asked to borrow money. You ain't got no money for yourself. But you said something kind to them, respectful to them, that made whatever burden or whatever they were dealing with, that a little bit lighter, a little bit easier. You didn't even do anything. And you didn't even think, matter of fact, you probably feel bad like, I wish I could have done more. All I had was some kind words for you and some words of encouragement. But even that, lighten their load a little bit, on Yom Al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is raising you ranks. Right? That's why, brothers and sisters, even for example, right? And I'll close with this, because obviously there's a little bit more in the time before the slides can come in. Let's put it in the context like what's happening right now. Whether it's in Palestine, or whether it's in Yemen, or whether it's in Sudan, or whether it's in Afghanistan, or whether it's in all of these different places, right? And somebody feels like, man, I don't have money to give. I'm not a politician. I'm not in a position where I feel like I can change or do something, right? But you have your words. You could be making dua for them, right? And we've talked about that before, and I'm sure it's been spoken about many more times before myself, right? Making dua for them, speaking kind words for them, raising awareness, educating others. All of that is with your what? Your tongue. And somebody might feel like, in comparison to the gravity and the nature of what is happening, like, what are my little words going to do against that? What is me saying something? It's not doing anything, but you don't know, right? You don't know what that would mean, first and foremost, to those people. And then second, whoever it is that you're making dua for, whoever that you're raising awareness for, speaking out for, speaking on behalf of, etc. You don't know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees that. Because it's not simply your words that Allah is looking at. Allah is looking at the heart behind that. Where was your heart when you said those things? When you were making that dua, when you were speaking out on behalf of someone, or you were speaking to someone and saying them positive words of support. That, brother, I'm with you in spirit. I'm with you. You're on our minds. We're praying for you. Right? We support you. Allah is looking at where your heart was. And that could magnify that deed, that simple word, right? As the Prophet ﷺ said, in Bukhari and in Muslim, to cause you to be raised and elevated in paradise, degrees and levels. For some simple words. Again, from the generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah is al-Jawad, that He gives more than we deserve. When you're doing small little things that you don't think is a big deal, like the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, you thought nothing of it. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do as a Muslim. I made dua for my brother. That's what I'm supposed to do. But you were sincere. You were genuine. It was heartfelt. It came from a real place. That you really wish that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does something for them. That He really helps them. That He really aids them. And you're really hoping that if I could do something, and if I did have the money, that genuinely for real, that could be nothing but mountains of goodness for you. And so I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He guard and guide us to guard our sight and our basar, and help us to lower it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to guard our tongues. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide our tongues to speak that which only pleases Him. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.